welcome back. It's summertime here on our little farm in Missouri, and that means Mama's giving haircuts on the front porch, kids are swimming in the pool, and time just is relaxed. There's plenty of it, and with little Evie being just 2.5 weeks old, we have been very, very relaxed around here. And I'm just barely getting up and getting things going again. One of my favorite things to do is get back in the kitchen and feed my sourdough after a little hiatus. I have been walking around in my pajamas for about 2 weeks. And so this is me just really dipping my toes back into the kitchen, back into routine. I'm feeding my sourdough for the first time in about 2.5 weeks. And so I'm just pouring off the liquid that always settles on top when it's been sitting in the fridge for a while. And I'm gonna give it at least a couple feedings before I bake bread with it. I'm gonna be sharing with you guys a sourdough discard muffin recipe. We're gonna be making some bread, of course, and some sourdough bagels, and just enjoying the simplicity of summer. I hope you'll slow down for a moment and spend some time with me today. Some of the most wonderful and delicious things that have been around for hundreds and thousands of years can be the most simple things, which is why they've been around so long. And that, my friends, is sourdough. So don't be fooled by the idea of sourdough being complex or being really hard. All it takes is giving it a try, making a million mistakes and learning from them, and enjoying the fruits of your labor. When you feed your sourdough, you have to discard half of your sourdough starter. And most people hate the idea of wasting their sourdough. I know I do. And so I fed this sourdough starter a couple of days ago, put it in this bowl, and now I'm going to discard. But instead of throwing that discard away, I'm going to be making some muffins out of it. The other portion of it, I'm going to feed again and prepare it to make some bread and some bagels with. But before we get started, I'm going to grind up some fresh wheat berries. Whenever I get ready to bake, I always like to grind some fresh wheat, especially with recipes that are calling for whole grains. So I'm just using my attachment here that goes on my KitchenAid, and I'm going to be putting some of this whole wheat into our muffins and into our whole wheat sandwich bread. These muffins remind me of my grandma's house. For breakfast, she always cooked something very healthy. Whole wheat waffles, oatmeal loaded with flax. She would even make for dessert whole wheat cookies stuffed with raisins, which I was not a fan of, by the way. But for breakfast, when I think of a muffin, I think of something that is nutrient dense and fibrous. And having just had a baby, fibrous is important. You mamas know what I'm talking about. But with Morning Glory muffins, the sky's the limit. You can add any fruits, nuts, seeds, and make it as nutrients dense as you want. or you could add chocolate to it too. When it comes to making a discard recipe, you do have the option of letting it ferment for a day or a few hours, and you can really benefit from all of the good fermentation process there. Or you could cook it up and bake it up right away, because it does have baking soda and baking powder in it. You can always find the links to the recipes down below, along with the link to my wheat grinder and anything else that I mention here on the channel. After practicing weeks and weeks of positive affirmations during my pregnancy, I was drawn to the book, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Peale. And in this book, he talks about the connection between creativity and energy. As young mothers, we often lack the energy, the physical energy or exertion to complete our tasks. And these days, sleep is definitely something that's lacking. But it struck me how important my craving is for creativity and how much energy it gives me when I'm involved in creative tasks. He recites the scripture, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint." So despite the amount of sleep or the lack thereof, or despite our physical state, we have so much power in our emotional and in our mental. And when we connect that to creativity and things that bring us joy, and that's connected to the Almighty, there is a boundless source of energy that we can connect to. The kind of energy that makes you excited to get up and ready for the day. That says, I'm going to put on a little bit of makeup this morning and do my hair because it makes me feel so good. And I'm so excited to do the tasks that I have before me. So whether that creativity is learning to bake a loaf of sourdough, or painting, or even learning to grow some flowers and arrange them in a vase, finding something that brings you joy and uplifts you and keeps your spirit moving forward and feeling alive. So I would love to hear what things you love to do. What is something that fills you with energy and passion? Write down in the comments down below. Did you know that putting your sourdough in some water and seeing if it floats is a great indicator to know if it's ripe and ready to bake with? If it sinks to the bottom, then it needs a little bit more time to ferment. So now we are preparing our sourdough bagels. And although when I measure out for my starter equal parts flour and water, I just do that by eye, I do use a scale and follow the recipe precisely when I am baking my sourdough breads. Using a scale is so simple, and all you have to do is follow the recipe and dump in the right amount of grams. So now that I've prepared my dough, I always let it sit there for about 30 minutes to autolyse, let all the grains soak up the water. And I'm also going to prepare my dough for my sourdough whole wheat sandwich bread as well. And this recipe I make on a weekly basis. I usually do 4 loaves at a time. It's just as easy as doing one, and then I freeze the rest of them. Today I'm going to make 2 loaves because my little boys are visiting their grandparents at the time, and I'm making bagels and bread, and I know that we're not going to go through it as fast as we normally would. The reason why you see me baking a lot more sandwich bread here on the channel rather than those crusty bowls is because that's what my family tends to eat more. We make a lot of French toast, a lot of sandwiches, especially during the summertime. And so that's what we use. But in the wintertime, when we are in soup season, I do make a little bit more of the sourdough crusty bowls that you're used to seeing, which are crunchy and delicious and so good with soup. I think the key with sourdough is to find a recipe that works for you and works in your kitchen, and just use that recipe over and over and over again until you become so good at it and you feel like you have that special recipe in your toolbox you can pull out and use whenever you need it. I've had to really come to terms that I couldn't do as much as I wanted to do in the garden this year, and we've had to really just let some things go. I love to say that a good gardener is in her garden every day, and I still think that. But I also have to remember not to beat myself up for not being able to attend the garden every day like I would like to, and that's okay. It's all about prioritizing the most important things right now and letting go of the things that are less important, and realizing that the dirty laundry will still be there when I wake up from this nap, and that the most important things right now are cuddling this little baby and taking care of the most important people in my life, and feeding them good food too, by the way. The wonderful thing is that we do live in a community of gardeners, which means we get to share lots of produce. And I have lots of neighbors and friends who are sharing their broccoli and sweet corn and squashes and all sorts of yummy things with us, and we get to do the same. So for tonight's dinner, I am going to pull out some marinated pork chops that I put together during my freezer meal video, which I will also link down below if you want to see the recipe there. But we are going to have this honey cilantro lime chicken, or honey cilantro lime pork chops that we made with some sweet corn from the neighbors, and we are going to use up some delicious fresh tomatoes from the garden and make a fresh garden salsa as well. This is absolutely my favorite way to cook, is just using what is in season at the time, kind of flying by the seat of my pants, I guess you could say, and just cooking up what feels good, what tastes good, and what we already have. So my sourdough bread and bagels have just finished their bulk fermentation. They've been fermenting for about 6 to 8 hours here on the countertop. And now I'm going to shape my loaves of bread and put them in the fridge overnight and bake them in the morning. It's important to really shape the dough, get all of those pieces tucked nice and under so that the top is nice and tight and smooth and elastic. The key to sourdough is really keeping the moisture in, especially during these rise times and fermentation. And so I like to wet my dough down with either a spray bottle or just getting my hands wet and smoothing over the dough to get it nice and wet. And I cover it with plastic wrap and also a towel as it sits in the fridge, just to keep all that moisture in so it can expand. And I'm gonna put my sourdough bagel dough in the fridge to bed as well and prepare that in the morning. You could have easily prepared the bagel dough this evening, let it ferment for a couple hours, and put it straight in the fridge to fix up in the morning. I love letting my bread sit in the fridge overnight. The rise is very slow in the fridge, but it does rise a little bit, and I feel like in the morning it's much easier to work with when it's cold. And I just set it there on the stove while the stove is heating and let it warm up for about an hour or more until I can tell that that dough has expanded. Now when it comes to these sourdough bagels, I'm just going to shape this dough as well into some rolls and let that sit on the hot stove over the warm baking oven as well. Sourdough bagels has been one of those things for me that is what I love about making sourdough bagels is that it sounds fancy but it's super simple and it always turns out really good. This is definitely one of those, I would say, beginning sourdough recipes that you should give your hand out if you're just starting out, because they always turn out good. They always turn out delicious. This particular recipe is actually a soft and chewy sourdough bagel recipe. I don't like my bagels really dense, although that's maybe the norm for some people and they like it that way, but I like mine kind of fluffy and soft and chewy. So I will be putting the recipe for this particularly soft and chewy sourdough bagel down in the description box below. And once again, I'm just patting my dough down with some water so that they expand and stay moist. You could also put a little bit of oil on those rolls so that the plastic doesn't stick to them. And I'm going to let them sit here on the warm stove for about an hour or so. Then onto my sourdough loaves, I like to score a nice line on top of my sandwich bread. I find that it expands much better and easier, and I love the shape of it when I do that score. And I'm just going to put it in the oven at 375 degrees for about 45 minutes. And I will also link the recipe for this bread down below. So to begin the bagel process, I'm going to start a pot of boiling water, and to that I'm going to add a heaping tablespoon of baking soda, a tablespoon of sugar, and a little bit of salt. And nothing says summer to me like a fresh BLT sandwich with garden fresh tomatoes. So that's what we are going to prepare with our bagels today. I love putting my bacon in the oven these days. It is so much easier to clean up when you just have to throw the foil away. You can drain off the fat, and the bacon always comes out crispy and delicious. Once that water comes to a boil, we're going to shape our bagels by poking a hole in the middle of them and just rotating the dough so it's even on all sides. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I just drop it into the boiling water for a minute on each side. And it's best if you drop it down face first or the top first, and then you can flip it over and it always comes out really, really pretty. And even if it doesn't come out pretty, these bagels are delicious. After you have pulled your bagels out of the hot boiling water, now you're going to add any toppings that you want to add here. I love to add poppy seeds, sesame seeds, cheddar with jalapenos is always popular in our house, or I like to add an everything season that I usually pick up from Trader Joe's, but you could add whatever you want. You could even do sweet bagels with cinnamon and sugar, but the sky is the limit here for the toppings, and you add the toppings onto your wet bagels, and then you put them in the oven at 400 degrees for about 10 minutes. Mine did a little bit better at 425 degrees for about 10 minutes, but just do what works best for you.
I woke up in the middle of the night. Na, na, na. And I wondered how you're always right. It gets me. I couldn't see what you saw in me. Ooh, na, na, na. But you showed me how to believe. Still gets me. When I look back, I can see you're hiding, waiting for a moment to step in. And I'll never understand how you saw it coming. Oh, but I will love you for it all. Yeah, I will love you for it all.
So make sure to check out the videos that are linked below and also the recipes that are down there. I would love to know if you tried any of these recipes. What are your thoughts on sourdough? And I would also love to know, what would you like to see next here on the channel? So let's chat down in the comments down below. And like always, I'll catch you next time. Love you lots.
It is hard to share my thoughts. Ooh, na, na, na. It's like cutting a